I'm Erin O'Byrne and welcome to Everything EFL podcast. I'm passionate about serving teachers and I offer training for schools and institutions whose language teachers need a little refresher, a change of mindset and some super practical ideas to put into their classrooms straight away. There is no one-size-fits-all lesson plan, but you've got a friend and support system in me. I can help reduce your overwhelm, give you some teacher inspiration, and improve your work-life balance. How? With some solid advice, takeaways you can try out immediately, and some much-needed teacher love, because your well-being is important too. Are you ready to make small changes one step at a time and remember how amazing you are? Let's go! Hello, you gorgeous teacher. If you're one of my lovely regular listeners, welcome back. If you're a brand new listener to Everything EFL, you are most welcome, and I hope you stick around. This week, I want to talk to you a bit about preparation and planning. Now, I've talked about it at length in a previous episode, that's episode 85, Reasons to Prep Less, but I just want to sort of go into it in a slightly different way. And it's because I've done some sessions in Dublin lately with some different schools, and it's really hard for teachers. Like, have you ever had that conversation with someone who doesn't teach and they say to you, oh, but you only work X amount of hours, and it's so difficult to explain to someone how draining teaching actually is. And then on top of that, you're expected to plan these amazing freaking lessons. And I'll just give you a little example. We are required to have engaging content. It has to be relatable. We have to deal with mixed abilities, differentiation, consider what issues are going to come up, anticipate any kind of problems to do with language and comprehension. We have to think about scaffolding and staging, any extra materials we want to include, photocopies. Are you going to create your own? Because sometimes that's the only viable option with the material that you already have. You need to build trust, confidence, community, unity, and then on top of that, you have to find the time to prep and plan all this. If you have a limited amount of time, what can you do? Okay, so there's loads of things you can do, and I just want to talk to you about a couple of things that I did with some teachers in some CPD sessions I've done lately. All low to no prep. They're ideas that you can implement, no hassle. They're very effective, engaging, useful, and practical. Firstly, if you use a course book, which I know most of you do, even if it's not ideal, we have to tick those boxes. How can you exploit the material you already have? Think about the texts and dialogues that you have in your book, those transcripts. How can you pick them apart and analyze them? You can use them in some noticing activities. And again, if you want a little bit more information about that, listen to episode 103, but I'll just give you a quick reminder right now, a quick rundown. Very simply, you could just have your students do a really quick task, like highlight all of the past simple verbs in this transcript and then put them into two categories, regular or irregular, on a T-chart. You could focus on a paragraph and highlight all of the sounds, for example, ow, or something like that. I think that pronunciation gets a little bit left by the wayside, and sound spelling is super important. So yeah, why don't you take 5 or 10 minutes and do a little activity where students identify and notice particular sounds? And if you think, well, I have a B2 class, they don't need this. Well, let me tell you a little story. I asked my B2 class a couple of weeks ago to highlight some ow sounds in a couple of paragraphs of a transcript that we did, and they missed a couple, most notably south. I have a lot of Spanish-speaking students, and of course it's that kind of sooth kind of pronunciation that they do, and they're not identifying the sound with the spelling, and I think that runs through most, if not all, levels to a certain extent. You can never do too much pronunciation, and if you're just assuming that your students are going to already know, well, you know what they say about assumptions, don't you? So in the workshops I did, we talked about how to incorporate pronunciation into each lesson in a low to no prep way. And yet they love the idea of using the transcripts they already have. You're already using them. Just reuse them with a slightly different angle. The students aren't going to mind. They're already familiar with the text, and it saves you spending more time trying to find more stuff. It's just absolutely pointless. And the beauty part is, if you really don't feel like you're doing enough pronunciation, a little exercise like this, 5 minutes, you don't need to plan it, and the students will get something out of it. Win-win. Now, if you are still spending too much time planning, ask yourself, why? Is it that, you're a perfectionist and you want everything to be as amazing as possible? Yeah, I get it. I used to be one of those teachers, and I still think my lessons are pretty amazing, but I'm also realistic. I don't get paid for my preparation time, so there's only a certain amount of time that I'm going to spend on it. And it doesn't mean I'm a bad teacher. It just means that I have a good work-life balance and I'm realistic. I used to spend hours and hours and hours preparing, and what thanks do you get? I'm sorry, what was that? Yeah, I thought so. Now, if your coursebook suffers from boring text syndrome, consider using ChatGPT or another AI text generator, because you can create a text that's actually more appropriate for your students' ages or likes and dislikes, especially if you have like a specific kind of class like EAP, business, or they have specific interests or reasons for learning. And you can always ask your students if there's something that they would like you to find to create a text with. And then if there's specific phrases or language, you can always put that into the prompt generator and then tweak it from there. Yeah, you have to tweak it, but the donkey work is done. And it stops that hours and hours of scrolling for a suitable text. If the text that's generated is a little bit like dull or inappropriate, you can ask the generator to liven it up, make it a little bit more informal, make it more suitable for teenagers, or if it's too difficult, ask it to simplify the text. And I think it's important to say, don't feel guilty about spending less time prepping, and don't feel guilty about using AI every now and then, or even quite often, if it saves you time and the material that it's producing is relevant and useful and practical for your learners. You're only human and you've got a life, and you can't spend your Sunday evenings planning or, all of your spare time planning. It's just not right. Another thing you could do is lighten the load. Do you have a good community in your staff room, or are you close to one or two other teachers in particular? If you are, then 2 or 3 of you or even more, you can share your resources. You could create a drive that you can post things that you find or create. And this is great for, again, like these little pronunciation games and things like that. There's tons of these little games and things online, picture charts. And then if you put it all into a drive, there's more for you to choose from and less work for you to do. And don't be afraid to reuse those games and materials. Students don't mind. And yourself, like, pronunciation is a skill. They're not just going to magically change their pronunciation because you did a 5-minute activity. They need that repetition and review. I think obviously it's easier once you have a few years' experience of teaching. You can let go of that sort of fear of failure if I don't spend hours preparing. But I think we have this fear that if I don't have everything planned to the last minute, if I don't have lots of materials, the lesson's going to go sideways. Newsflash, it's not. If you prep less, I think it leaves more time for creativity, and more importantly, those spaces where you're actually listening to your students and responding and reacting to what they're saying. And this is where that lovely emergent language comes from. I'm sure you've heard that term before if you've listened to my podcasts, and you can do this from beginner to advanced. Now, I'll give you some examples if you're not sure what this is. So my B2 lesson today, we were practicing will and I don't think I'll for spontaneous decisions. One of them said, I don't think I'll go out. And I could see the cogs turning before they said it. And I think they were trying to sort of say something like stay at home or stay in, but they weren't quite sure how to say it, so they switched it to going out. And that's absolutely fine. It's perfectly good English. It's a phrasal verb. We use it all the time. However, I was thinking, all right, so maybe I need to elevate their language a bit and give them the alternative. Stay in. I think I'll stay in. None of them knew it. Brilliant. They've just learnt a new phrase. Perfectly suitable for B2. And then another one was something like, if I'm sick, I might give my children problems. First of all, I clarified, are you talking about like some sort of hereditary sickness, or your children have to look after you? And she said, they have to look after me. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to be a burden. Great. So again, what they're saying is fine, we can understand it, but let's give them a more natural or elevated alternative. Let me give you another example of elevation, okay? So one of them said, I don't have the money for that, right? And again, it's grammatically correct, but as a B2 learner, I think a slightly more elevated phrase and very appropriate for that level is, I can't afford it. Some of them knew it, some of them didn't. Emergent language is not error correction. Error correction is when you're correcting those little grammatical mistakes like it's depend of, or like missing prepositions, the wrong tense, stuff like that. But emergent language is about reformulating to give more natural, better phrases. So you're just giving them a little bit more language than they already have. So 1, again, more elevated language. 2, you're completely reformulating because what they're saying doesn't quite sound natural. And that takes up space in your lessons. And you've got a nice little bank of phrases that you can reuse and recycle in different ways. So keep a note of this emergent language. You can keep them on vocabulary cards. You could introduce them in a dialogue at a later date, again, generated by ChatGPT. You could put them on the board and get your students to make little 2-line dialogues themselves. You could write conversation questions using them, or get your students to write conversation questions. Like, is there something you can't afford right now, or something like that? Your imagination is the limit here. Or maybe brainstorm some recycling activities with your colleagues, or look online for more recycling activities. There are tons of them. But the idea is reusing and reintroducing that language in future lessons, because you know yourself, your students probably won't remember it just once. Definitely worth going over again. And if you have this growing bank of phrases and you don't have too much time to prep, or you're just plain bloody tired, or you're reaching the end of the unit and there's not quite enough to fill the lesson, let's have a little language recycling session, or let's create space in the lesson where students talk about something, they have a little discussion. So just listen, note down what they say, reformulate it on the board. Students are always interested in new language, and they seem to really respond to, and the more natural way to say it is, or this is good, you're not wrong, but this is more natural. So we're not talking about correcting, we're not talking about mistakes, we're talking about better language. And, it's not your job just to teach, it's your job to help them speak better. So that's just a little taste of some of the stuff that we talked about in my CPD sessions that I do. One thing I always promise is that the main focus for me, and by me I mean you, is ideas and mindset shifts so that your teaching improves, but I'm not necessarily overloading you or overwhelming you with more prep. It's all about low to no prep for me. So just making these little changes, but really powerful, impactful changes that can help you and help your students. Look, you know me, maybe you don't, but if you do, you know that I love teachers and my mission is to serve teachers in the best way that I can. And for me, that means making your life easier and trying to decrease the burnout that you may have, and just generally restore your work-life balance. So that's it from me, my darling, gorgeous teacher. Don't forget to subscribe to Everything EFL if you haven't already. Tell your colleagues about it. Share one of my posts. Sign up to my Breathe Easy Teacher newsletter. I'm back to twice a month now. So again, if you just need a little tip, just something small, it's usually something I've tried that works, but it's always low to no prep. And I always encourage you to try it in your next class. And I think that's a less overwhelming way of doing things, just take the challenge, try it out, see how it goes. And then because the newsletter's every couple of weeks at the moment, you get a little bit of time and space to try it, think about it, reflect. And of course, hit reply and let me know. I'm always interested to hear from you. And I'm always at the end of an email if you need support. So follow me on the social medias if you don't already. All of my links are in the show notes. Email me at erin@refreshyourteaching.com if you would like a chat about a CPD session for your school, either in-house or online. I am available and ready to help. Till next time, my darling teacher, share the love. Bye.